Yeah, just an introduction for Chaz. He is with the City of Raleigh in the Stormwater Group, and he is currently Region 4 Governor for North Carolina and has served also at the branch level and the section level, still serving. So he's very heavily involved with ASCE. So if you don't know him already, probably a good idea to get in contact with him. He kind of knows a lot of what's going on, um, and has a lot of good information. He's also, definitely qualified in my mind to be giving this ethics presentation just because it's one of the engineers I know that's extremely hardworking, a lot of integrity, and passion for our discipline and making sure that everyone else is educated and understands the principles of our profession. So I can let him say a little more about himself as well. So probably do a better job than I can. So I'm going to hand it off to him and let us know if you're having any issues hearing or with the visual for the people online. But I appreciate everyone who's able to make it out in person as well, especially with the weather. Definitely a little bit out of the ordinary. The kickoff meeting that we were supposed to have was supposed to have it 2 weeks ago, and it got snowed out. Uh, and we were a little worried that we'd end up snowed out again. So definitely interesting times, but I'll hand it off to him.
I appreciate it. All right. As Ned mentioned, and can the folks online, can y'all hear me? Give a thumbs up or just yeah, we can hear you. Want to make sure you guys can hear me. All right.
Yep.
Yeah, we got a thumbs up. Thank you, Stephen. All right. So here to talk about ethics. I am Chaz Webb. Now, in the bio, you probably saw or you may have read that I enjoy classic rock concerts. Keep that in mind. It's going to show up at some point here in this presentation. But we're glad to have our ethics presentation in January because, as we all know, NC Bells has a requirement that we must have some sort of course on ethics. So rather than waiting till the end of the year, get it out of the way. And now we can move on to other presentations. But happy to be here, happy to talk about ethics. I'm sure we are all qualified to talk about ethics because I know every single person in this room does the right thing. I can be sure of that. So just a little overview, the presentation. We'll look at some definitions, go over some case studies, and when we look at these case studies, feel free to give your opinion. Some of them will be straightforward. Others will not be as straightforward as to what would you do? Look at some data analysis and then questions and comments. So I want to start off with a quote. This is by Herbert Hoover. He was a mining engineer, if you did not know that. And he says, the great liability of the engineer compared to men of other professions is that his works are out in the open where all can see them. His acts, step by step, are in hard substance. You cannot bury his mistakes in the grave like doctors. You cannot argue them into thin air or blame the judge like lawyers. Keep that in mind as we move forward. So, ethics definition. It's moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. It comes from Oxford Dictionary. Now, ethics is about doing the right thing. Doing the right thing may not always be easy, but it is the right thing to do. And we don't have to make this complicated. We don't have to, we will get faced with ethical dilemmas and decisions we'll see every point throughout our lives. But I just want to point something out that ethics are not the same as law. Laws are structured to govern the people, or ethics are for our moral values. All right, case study. Let's start off with an easy one. We're in New York City. We're going to go take a subway ride, and we notice that the machine is not working. You have the ability to walk through the turnstile without paying. What are you going to do? Don't be shy. Go on. You're going to walk? All right. All right, I'm glad you said. What if there's a cop there? Okay, anybody else? Okay. Well, the correct answer is you don't walk through the subway. There's a point in that in mentioning, hey, this is not working. Uh, but you alert some sort of security or transportation personnel that the turnstile is malfunctioning.
After you do that, you walk through, because you've got somewhere to go.
If he tells you, now I would get clarification on that. I would say, hey, if this isn't working, is there a way I can pay? Just, don't, you're not the authority, the transportation authority, so just seek out their input. If they say you go ahead, you go ahead. But if it's open and you just walk through and you don't say anything, no, that to me would be unethical.
The cop's on the other side of the turnstile, so you're gonna have to go through. Oh.
But you can get their attention. Motion for them to go. Don't just walk through the turnstile without pay. No, I am glad that somebody said that it was, oh, I would not pay. My dad has given ethics courses. He has actually given this example. Now, I'm not going to copy all of what he said because that would be unethical. But he has said, and if you had the ability to walk through, would you? And some people have said, yeah. If the subway station is dumb enough to let it open, I'm walking through and I'm not paying. I'm going where I need to go. And then he would ask, well, what if there was a cop there? And then it's a little bit different answer. So sometimes ethics comes down to if we are going to get caught. Now let's look at the bridge at Tellico Falls. This is just a fictional example, but bridge at Tellico Falls was inspected by a county inspector. The inspector called the engineer, we'll call him Tom. He is overseeing the bridge, the project, and said that the bridge should be closed. Tom agreed to close the bridge based on how much the bridge was deflecting, and the residents were furious as this added an hour to their trip. County engineer, who's Tom's supervisor, receives a lot of complaints. He visits the bridge without Tom and decided that the bridge should be open. The county engineer visited Tom's office and ordered a rush part to fix the bridge deflection. So the county engineer is acting in favor of convenience over safety. And I want to emphasize that the residents are not engineers. Engineers, we are the experts when it comes to things like this, bridge deflections, stormwater, road design. Tom needs to speak up because it's ethical. Even if it puts his job in jeopardy, it's the right thing to do. And I know that's not easy. I know I've been there where I've wanted to speak up. Now, this was not my current job with the City of Raleigh. Preface that. That was back in Chattanooga. But you have to speak up. Even if it puts your job in jeopardy, speak up. Because the ASCE Code of Ethics says, first and foremost, to protect health, safety, and welfare of the public. All right. So last month, I gave a similar presentation to the City of Raleigh Stormwater Engineering Services Department. We had realized that a lot of city employees still need their ethics requirement, and so I was asked to put something together back in late November. And so over Thanksgiving break, I just was putting this together, and I looked at some headlines on some news stations, news websites, and this jumped out to me. Just first page, I see this was Thanksgiving. Now keep in mind, various ethic violations, people doing unethical things. Igor Swiatek, tennis player, suspension for using a banned substance. We may recall the Macy's hit up to $154 million. I mean, home warranty firm accused of not paying up when appliances break. All of these unethical. So it leads to something. Why do good people do bad things? Just makes me wonder. And these are some things that we can look at. Societal pressure, the need to fit in. I think we saw this with baseball and steroids. You know, it was, oh, Mark McGuire is doing steroids. I need to do steroids as well to keep up. And everybody else was doing steroids. That's one of the reasons I've heard. Well, everybody else was doing it. Lack of self-awareness. So back when I was 22, I'm a little bit older than that now, I got my first speeding ticket, my one and only speeding ticket. I was going 68 in a 55. I thought it was a 65. Now, I told the officer that, and he really didn't care. He's like, "No, it's a 55. Sorry. That just because you didn't know doesn't excuse you." So sometimes we don't know what we're doing. Misguided justice, retaliation. Now, think about this. The NC State ECU game. I know we've got some NC State fans here. We're in the NC State club, and I'm sorry for bringing up that bowl game. But there was that brawl, that fight at the end of the game. And if you look at that fight, it started with one guy just taking a towel, and it led to a whole big brawl. It was retaliation. And oftentimes, if you're watching a football game, oftentimes the guy that gets penalized isn't the guy that started the fight. It's the guy that retaliates that gets the penalty. You'll see that a lot. Or sometimes people just don't have any other options. If you have nothing to, if you're stuck in this position where you have nothing to lose. And so they just have no other options but to do something wrong or unethical. None of these are justification for being unethical, but it's important to understand the mindset of people sometimes and why they choose to do unethical things. All right, so let's look at some of the code of ethics of different professional organizations. We are ASCE, so of course I'm going to mention the ASCE Code of Ethics. Members of the American Society of Civil Engineers shall conduct themselves with integrity, professionalism, and above all else, protect and advance the health, safety, and welfare of the public through the practice of engineering. Look what the American Medical Association says. As a member of this profession, a physician must recognize responsibility to patients first and foremost, as well as to society, to other health professionals, and to self. American Bar Association. Now, this is number 13. This is in the beginning where we saw with the American Medical Association and the American Society of Civil Engineers. This is down buried 13th paragraph. Lawyers play a vital role in the preservation of society. The fulfillment of this role requires understanding by lawyers of their relationship to our legal system. The rules of professional conduct, when properly applied, serve to define that relationship. Now, what I'm noticing, and this is perhaps a bit subjective, that the American Society of Civil Engineers, compared to these two other professional organizations, really focuses on the public and the public safety and the public welfare. You can kind of make a case with the American Medical Association that they talk about it. But this was interesting. This was a recent ethics rating professions, percent high or very high. You'll notice that nurses are at the top, followed by veterinarians, then engineers. So the public has said there is a lot of trust. We have put a lot of trust in how engineers behave ethically. Now, not surprising, at the bottom, the three bottom are car salespeople, senators, and members of Congress. I'm sure that surprises nobody in this room. But you'll notice that doctors are a little bit below. They went engineers, dentists, medical doctors, and then lawyers were towards the bottom half. So is there a direct trend? Could you say that, okay, their code of ethics addresses more or less about the public health and welfare? Who knows? I think there's a lot of external factors to that, but I did find that a little bit interesting. So this is another, let's go back in time to when Gallup started doing these polls. And you'll see the red is high or very high. So it is a combination of the light blue line as well as high, which is, or excuse me, very high. So it's a combination of light blue and the orange. And you'll notice that throughout the years, right about 2000, people really started to trust engineers. I mean, high or very high, 70%. That's really good. And then we've started to go down a bit, but we will see that that was a general trend. If you recall from the previous slide, a lot of professional organizations, people lost trust in professionals in general, and there's definitely a lot of reasons for that. I think there's just a lack of trust in people in general that has happened. I can recall stories about my own hometown where you could park the car in the parking lot and you didn't have to lock your doors, and now you got to lock your doors. I think a lot of people can relate to that as well. Although the average has increased a little bit, so there is some good news, some hope in that regard. But we have set the standard. So we represent one of the most trusted professions in the United States. And as I mentioned with the opening quote, we should be setting that standard. People believe in engineers more than other professions. They should. We have a great responsibility to protecting the health, welfare of the public. Now we have gone down a little bit. I know engineers were all about numbers and trends and seeing, well, how do we reverse that trend? How can we get a little bit confidence going back in the right direction? So I am a believer that to reverse or improve, you got to kind of look back as to where ASCE started with the Code of Ethics and see how we got to this point. Now, the first proposal for a Code of Ethics came in 1877. ASCE was about 25 years old at that point. Secretary Gabriel Leverich proposed, whereas a civil engineer in the practice of his profession is sometimes restrained or overruled by his employers in matters involving serious risk to property and life, which he only as the engineer should determine, whence he must either discharge his duties in a manner contrary to his best judgment or resign his position. This got rejected because it was felt that no engineer would ever commit something unethical, right? Never could we have imagined that, but I think that's a sign of the changing times, as I put it before. So it wouldn't be until 1914 that the first ASCE Code of Ethics was adopted. And it was a little bit, it was quite shorter than what it is right now. To act for his clients in professional matters otherwise than as faithful agent or trustee, to accept any remuneration other than his stated charges for services rendered to his clients, to attempt to injure falsely, maliciously, directly, or indirectly the professional reputation, prospects, business of another engineer, to attempt to supplant another engineer after definite steps have been taken toward his employment. Interesting. So what jumps out to you? Now, I know I mentioned I'm a classic rock fan, and this was Van Halen literally jumping to the song Jump. But anything jumped out to you about my previous slide? Now, I will say that other engineer is mentioned in 3 times in the next 3 bullet points. So what they did was they focused on other engineers. It wasn't as much as an impact to the health, welfare, and society as we see now. There is a section about that, about your peers in the current Code of Ethics. But it had much to do with, hey, don't be a bad person to your colleague or your fellow engineer. So let's pivot a little bit to AI and ethics. Artificial intelligence is here for better or for worse. I've heard mixed opinions about that, whether it's good or bad. It's here. So a lot of companies, governments have addressed AI in the workplace through policy. And per the Texas School of Business, these policies focus on fairness, trust, transparency, and accountability. So when you read the ASCE, the current code of ethics, the word fairness is mentioned 3 times. Preamble, treat all persons with respect, dignity, and fairness. Also, Canon 1 talks about society. Canon 5, peers, act with honesty, fairness, and collaborative work efforts. Now, also mentioned from that Texas School of Business was trust, transparency, and accountability. ASCE Code of Ethics, 0 tolerance for bribery, fraud, and corruption. Report misconduct to the appropriate authorities. Uphold integrity and dignity. Only take credit for professional work that they have completed. So these principles have, if you follow these principles, these are our guiding ideas for how we can deal with AI and how we can approach that. So I do believe that the current code of ethics is built for that, and it is set up well. So now let's talk about another thing: media and ethics. Now, when disasters occur, people want answers and they want them fast. Now, we saw with the unfortunate events of Hurricane Helene. In fact, there were requests for inquiries. I know when the bridge collapsed in Pennsylvania, the ASCE out there, that section, they got a lot of questions very quickly about that event, and they had just done their report card. So that was interesting because it was the questions they got were, was this bridge included in the report card? Did you look at this bridge? And those can be tough to answer. So you always need to be prepared. I don't want to dive too much into this topic because this is part of the DV Terrell competition that we have for Region 4 coming up in the spring. So I'm not going to get too much into it, but I just want to point this out. So make sure, first of all, when you get a request, I know some people, we like the limelight. Engineers tend to be, let me just do my job and get out, and I'll be on the down low. Make sure you are the correct person to talk to. Stick to the facts. I know that seems straightforward, but a lot of people, they think that they know something, or they may not know if it's true, and they say something. Stick to what you know. So back in 2013, I was president of the Chattanooga Track Club. We had about 1,000 members, and you may recall that in April of 2013, the tragic events of the Boston Marathon bombing occurred. And I was asked by several media outlets to talk about bombings and marathons and races. I didn't have a clue. I mean, I knew how to put on a race. I didn't know about safety tactics and what went on for security. I mean, Chattanooga, great city, nowhere compared to the size of Boston. So we just had our general police force that would go out and monitor races. And that's all I could say. I could say, hey, yes, we try to have a safe race. But as far as, what Boston did, I can't comment on that. And that's okay. And one trick, whether it's intentional or unintentional, is when you are getting interviewed, sometimes who's ever asking you the questions from the media, they will have a slight pause after the question. And like I said, sometimes that's on purpose, sometimes it's not. But people, when they're being interviewed, they want to make sure they're saying the right thing. So they will say something, and if they feel like, oh, maybe that wasn't the right thing to say, there's a pause there. And so sometimes, and I've seen this on different media outlets where people have been interviewed, not necessarily to engineers or runners, but they will then say something else, and you can see the person that's asking the questions just smiles because they got a pretty good quote that they can run with now. Yes.
I've been interviewed a number of times, and I found that if they interview you for 5 minutes or 7 minutes, they will publish the most embarrassing 3 seconds.
Yeah.
The comment that you threw out that you weren't thinking about, and there'll be no context at all. And they're there to do a job and make something sensational, not to get the truth out.
Mhm.
So I've stopped doing that. I've stopped talking.
You just stopped. You stopped. That's probably for the better. Unless if my boss were to come to me and say, "Hey, you need to talk to the media," and I would, yeah, you try to know what you're comfortable with. But if that happened, I'm sorry that happened to you. So
They have a different job.
yes, agreed. Good point. All right. So DV Terrell, I just want to give a plug for this. This is a competition for our younger members. This is coming up. And the question is, considering ethics, what role do civil engineers play in the prevention and response to infrastructure disaster? Should an infrastructure disaster rouse civil engineers globally to advocate for more resilient protections for built infrastructure from climate-driven and/or man-made disaster? I'm not going to give that input because as a Region 4 governor, I will be part of the grading process on that. But I just want to point this out that you must be 35 or less and live in Region 4. We are Region 4. We are in North Carolina, which is one of the 8 states in Region 4. Submit a paper to Section President J. Balakrishnan and copy me as well, and my email will be at this end presentation, or you can find my email on the website. Or I know when we were having our hunting year, I sent you guys like 5 emails in the last 5 months. So you probably got some sort of email from me. So papers are due by March 1st. Try to coordinate with Jay and myself well in advance. And these are going to be presented in person at the Region 4 Assembly, tentatively scheduled for May 1st and May 2nd in Indianapolis. So that's just my little ASCE plug for DV Terrell. All right, case study. Sarah is a highly respected engineer at a firm, and she's going to run for public office. That's, as a public employee, I commend that. It's not easy. Now, one of the key topics for voters was revitalization of a downtown project. Sarah's firm worked on the project, but it was done by others. Sarah mainly conducted QC and technical guidance. On Sarah's website, she said, "Vote for Sarah. We will fix the budget just like the downtown district. We need an engineer like her on city council." So, question for you guys: did Sarah commit anything unethical? Should Sarah be able to use her firm's work to support her candidacy? Any thoughts on this? No. So a little tricky. It's commendable that Sarah is running for public office, but she did take credit for work that wasn't hers. Think back to Canon 5 of the ASCE Code of Ethics. And while she did some work on the project, she was not directly responsible for the project. This is a false claim and unfair to her colleagues who did a majority of the work. All right, so I'm going to play a movie clip for you guys. And this is from The Legend of Bagger Vance. This came out in 1999, and this was a movie about golf. And I'm using a golf movie, not just because I know that through the ASCE Eastern Branch Golf Tournaments, we have some excellent golfers, but because we have a dilemma. And just to set the stage, Matt Damon is playing a fictional character, Randolph Juna. He's going down in a back and forth match with 2 golf legends back from the 1920s and 30s, Bobby Jones and Walter Hagen. And he has a chance to win. And if you're not familiar with golf, there's a rule that if you have a ball and it's sitting down, it's come to rest, and you move a twig or loose impediment near it, and the ball moves, you have a penalty. And so even if nobody else sees it, you are to call it on yourself. So let's see if this plays. And let's see what happens here with Matt Damon and Will Smith.
No, no, please, I don't feel so. Cross my heart. I'm like, oh no. So I can tell him not to do it, Megan. It's stupid rule that don't mean nothing. Six. The Jones and eight. This was no way to win a match. Maybe you're mistaken, Julie. Maybe it moved before you touched your pen. Might not have moved at all. The light plays funny tricks with him. The ball is it's a original position in the east of degree. The public it oscillates to rest its original position. So sometimes a little settle back in.
All right, so I love that line. Now, just so for some context here, it was believed that Will Smith, who's playing the caddy, that he was really just he wasn't real. He's kind of a fictitious character within this movie. So that's why the interaction with him and the little boy, the four caddy, is about I'm only going to see it, and I'm not going to tell anybody. To which Matt Damon, Randolph Jr. responds with, I will know, and so will you. And so just keep this in mind when you are faced with an ethical dilemma that if you make an unethical decision, whether or not anybody else knows, whether or not anybody else will find out, you will know. So knowing when we make bad decisions can last forever. It will stick with us forever. And those who have high morals and ethics, it'll haunt them. And they will think back for time to about that decision. Now, I do understand that we have decisions at every turn. Every day, we are faced with ethical decisions, not just in work, but in life in general. And these decisions aren't easy. I get it. It's sometimes doing what's right isn't easy, but it is what's right. Now, if we get stuck, we can use guiding principles to help. So if you get stuck, ask yourself the following questions. How would you feel if this were posted in the newspaper? If I send an email and I've committed something unethical, which of course I've never done, but what happens if that makes the newspaper here? Or I could say more, what if my grandma finds out that I did something unethical? Now I'm really in trouble. Have you caused harm to anyone? Think about that. Would you be proud of this decision in a few years? Something to think about as well. And does this seem fair? These are all questions you can ask yourself. Now, I know when we were going through these case studies and you're answering about the turnstiles, you may have thought of these questions to answer that and gave your responses. So I just want to say that as engineers, we need to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. We need to act as faithful agents to clients, employers, integrity and professionalism. And we need to adhere to the principles of sustainable development and perform services only in areas of one's competence. And these all come from the ASCE Code of Ethics. I believe that they are a very good code of ethics. We saw, we made some comparisons. So I'll close with this. This was a quote I love. If you never do any more than you are worth, you will never be worth any more than you do. And this quote talks about just doing your job, about going above and beyond, not just doing the bare minimum, not mailing it in. Ethics is a big part of going above and beyond. As we've seen, unethical decisions can hurt us, they can haunt us. So we are engineers. The public and society has challenged us to set the bar, to set the standard. So let's show them that we will continue to set that standard and that we will continue to be ethical and ethical leaders. And when we do that, our worth will come. So thank you. And I appreciate your time and attention. I will open it up to questions, and this is how you can reach me. Yes, sir.
Earlier on in the presentation, you had a slide that showed the 2 or 3 groups that were at the bottom of the list.
Yes.
I think in terms of their reputation. I can't remember what you had. What did you have at the bottom of the list?
Senators and congressmen. People. Well, yeah, I mean, they are valid, but that was what Gallup had, and I think it illustrates that there's a lack of trust in those groups.
They're really 5 professionals in the United States, recognized professionals, engineer, architect, accounting, medical, and legal. Those are the 5 that meet all the criteria for actually being a professional. So, was your presentation based on recognition of those 5 groups, including the engineers report, or was it just broadly anybody that would call themselves professional?
Well, it was to highlight that engineers are setting the standard. That we have set that standard, and we are among the top 3 for ethical professions. Yeah.
Just follow up what he's saying. If you're not a licensed professional, you're actually not required to be it. Anybody I know.
Yeah, that's a fair
But if
point.
you're a
Yeah.
professional, you really are. You have no choice other than to be it. Without, still.
Right.
But it makes an interesting point.
It's yeah.
Politicians, they don't have to be it. Nobody really expects it.
Well, they still in a way answer to the public because they have to get elected.
Not licensed, they don't have to do it.
Right.
I think there's probably some sort of, not that it really means anything, but they probably have like a code of ethics for, the body of whatever it is, right? They probably have some stated, but you're right that it's not like you'll lose your license the way we would.
There's a difference between a licensed and an unlicensed individual.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So we're following. Licensed board has no jurisdiction over unlicensed engineers. Nothing they really do to them.
Right. That's a valid point too.
So it's a burden and obligation, really.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you, guys.